I used to think my life was finally turning a corner the morning everything went sideways. After 13 years in the Army, 5 deployments, 2 commendations, and 1 very stubborn back injury, I had finally transitioned into a calmer posting at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. I was still active duty, but the pace was slower, the hours steadier, and I was just starting to feel like a normal human again. My name is Sergeant Caroline Brooks, and at 37, I thought I had seen enough chaos for 10 lifetimes. I was wrong. The day started quietly. I left my apartment in Bay Ridge with a cup of bad coffee, a folder of boring logistics paperwork under my arm, and a plan to finish work early so I could swing by my sister's house. Sandra, my older sister by 2 years, had been texting nonstop about some family business she wanted to loop me into. Whenever Sandra had family business, it usually meant something exhausting that involved her husband, Evan, talking down to me like I was a recruit who hadn't learned to tie her boots yet. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I was planning to go anyway. Duty, guilt, habit, pick one. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I let those go to voicemail, but for some reason, I picked up. A calm male voice introduced himself as attorney Richard Fallon from Fallon and Carter LLP in Manhattan. He asked if I could come by his office immediately regarding an estate matter involving someone named Gloria Kane. It took me a moment to register the name. Gloria wasn't a close relative, she was more like a distant cousin of my father's second wife. I'd met her maybe 3 times in my life, always at awkward barbecues where she wore oversized sunglasses and asked probing questions about everyone else's finances. She'd been wealthy, eccentric, and notoriously private. I couldn't imagine why her estate lawyer was calling me. But he sounded serious. Not dramatic, just serious enough that my military instincts kicked in. I signed out, grabbed my keys, and drove straight into Manhattan. Fallon's office sat on the 32nd floor of a polished high-rise near Bryant Park. Everything smelled like expensive carpet cleaner and old money. Fallon himself was an older white man with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a handshake that probably cost more than my car. He asked me to sit. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Then he said a sentence that didn't even feel real. "Sergeant Brooks, Miss Kane left her entire personal estate valued at $11.4 million to you." For several seconds, I didn't blink. My brain went into the same foggy pause it used when mortar fire landed too close in Afghanistan. I stared at Fallon, waiting for the punchline. He just folded his hands and waited. "Why?" I finally asked. "She named you in her will 3 years ago," Fallon explained. "Apparently, she admired your military service and felt you represented what she called the last decent branch of this family tree." Her words. I let out an involuntary snort. It was either laugh or pass out. After he finished reviewing the paperwork and the logistics of transferring the trust, along with a warning that the funds wouldn't be accessible until a review period cleared, I left the building in a daze. $11 million. I'd spent my whole adult life budgeting down to the dollar. I'd lived through deployments where half the barracks bet I wouldn't even make it home. And now someone I barely knew had handed me a fortune. I got into my Jeep and sat there breathing slowly, grounding myself like my old therapist taught me after my second deployment. I needed to tell someone, not the whole world, just one person. And for reasons I'll probably examine in therapy until the day I die, the first person I called was my boyfriend of 2 years, Travis Hale. Travis worked in finance well. Worked might be generous. He floated between jobs, consulting gigs, and promising opportunities. I paid most of our rent, our groceries, half his traffic tickets. I had always excused it by telling myself that service members have weird, messy personal lives. At least he wasn't deployed somewhere dangerous. At least he was here. He picked up on the second ring. "Caroline, babe, can I call you back? I'm at a lunch meeting." I took a breath. "You need to hear this. I inherited money. Real money. Over 11 million. There was a silence. Sharp, heavy, unnatural. Then Travis returned with a tone I had never heard from him. "Where are you?" "In the parking garage under the building," I said. "I'm heading—" "No," he cut in. "Stay there. I'm coming to you. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't sign anything. I'm on my way." His voice was tight, strained, almost panicked. It set off an alarm bell in my head that I ignored. I should not have ignored it. I hung up, started the Jeep, and pulled out of the garage. I didn't notice the black pickup truck until I merged onto Lexington. It slid behind me, then beside me, then too close. When it swerved, there wasn't even time to swear. The crash hit with a violence I'd only ever felt from blast waves overseas. Metal screamed. My body snapped sideways. The world blurred into a smear of lights and tearing noise. Then nothing. When I woke, the ceiling above me wasn't familiar. The lights were harsh, sterile. My ribs burned like fire under my skin. A nurse leaned over me, checking my vitals. Her name tag read Nurse Helen McCarthy. "You're okay," she said gently. "You're at Mount Sinai. You've been out for almost 2 days." My mouth felt dry as dust. Was anyone with me? My family? Travis? Helen looked at me with a softness I recognized. It was the look medics gave soldiers when the news wasn't good. "No one's come, honey. We called the emergency contacts listed." No one answered. For several seconds, I stared at the wall. No Sandra. No Evan, no Travis, not one person. Helen handed me my phone. The screen was spiderwebbed but functional. I called Travis first. He picked up after 5 rings. "What now?" he snapped. My grip tightened. "I was in a crash. I've been here for 2 days, no one came." He exhaled loudly, annoyed. "Caroline, I'm dealing with something important. I don't have time for whatever this is. You always exaggerate. Handle it yourself." "Travis, I'm serious. Don't call me again unless it's actually important." And he hung up. The steady beep of the monitor beside me carried on like nothing happened. My ribs hurt, my head throbbed, and for the second time in my life, I felt the exact emotional numbness I'd felt the night my convoy rolled over an IED in Kandahar. The moment where the body survives but something deeper cracks. Helen squeezed my arm gently. "You're not alone. We'll help you get through this." She meant it kindly. She didn't know yet that someone had tried very hard to make sure I didn't get through anything again. And there was something else, something I didn't understand yet, that would hit even harder when I saw who walked into my hospital room next, wearing my boyfriend's suit jacket and smiling like she expected me to already be dead. The door swung open before I could shift upright, and the air in the room tightened around me like a wire pulled too hard. A woman stepped inside, tall, polished, confident in a way that didn't come from beauty but from knowing her place in the world was paved with other people's backs. She wore Travis's favorite navy suit jacket, the one he claimed he only brought out for serious business. Seeing it on her shoulders made my stomach clench. She didn't look at me right away. She scanned the room the way officers assess a battlefield, efficient, uninterested in anything that isn't a threat. When her eyes finally landed on me, something flickered across her face. Not surprise, not concern. More like irritation that I was breathing. "You're awake," she said, like it was an inconvenience. I recognized her not personally, but I'd seen her at a few finance events where Travis dragged me along to network. Melissa Grant, a corporate attorney from a boutique firm in Tribeca, always dressed like she billed by the minute and smiled like she was allergic to sincerity. She dropped a folder onto the rolling tray at the foot of my bed. "We need your signature." My ribs pulsed under the bandages. "For what?" Melissa pulled Travis's jacket tighter around herself. "Travis asked me to handle things. You were listed as co-owner on a few accounts, and he wants to separate them before things get complicated." The tone in her voice told me she wasn't here to help. She was here to claim something. Maybe everything. The fluorescent lights hummed above us as she flipped open the folder, holding out a pen like she expected me to sign without reading a word. I dealt with hostile interrogators, officers with terrible tempers, civilians who panicked under pressure, but this was a different battlefield entirely. "I'm not signing anything," I said. She tilted her head. "You don't know what the documents say. I know you came here in my boyfriend's jacket. That tells me enough." "No." For the first time, her expression slipped. Just a hair. Her fingers tightened around the pen. The door creaked again. This time, it wasn't a lawyer in stolen clothing. It was Nurse Helen, holding a tablet and wearing the same expression she'd had when she told me no one had come to see me. Calm, controlled, but with something simmering underneath. "Is everything all right in here?" she asked. Melissa flashed a professional smile. "We're fine." I didn't break eye contact with Melissa. "Actually, no, we're not." Helen moved a little closer to the bed. "Ma'am, unless your immediate family or legal counsel already on file, I'm going to need you to step outside." "She is my counsel," Melissa snapped. "No," I said quietly. "She's not." Helen raised an eyebrow. "Then I need you to leave now." Melissa hesitated, eyes darting between us, calculating. Lawyers always calculated. Then she reached into the inside pocket of Travis's jacket. My jacket, technically, since I'd bought the damn thing, and pulled out her business card. She dropped it onto my blanket. "Call me when you're ready to be reasonable," she said. She walked out without looking back. Helen picked up the card, read it, and let out a sharp breath through her nose. "You military types always date the worst men." "I didn't ask for your analysis," I muttered. "No," she said, tapping the card against her palm, "but you sure need it." She slipped the card into my bedside drawer like she was filing away evidence. I tried to shift upright, and pain shot through my chest hard enough to taste metal. Helen steadied me with one hand. "Easy, you fractured 3 ribs. Do you know who brought me in?" "Ambulance reports say a passerby called 911. Driver of the truck didn't stop." "Of course he didn't. People don't stick around after they try to kill someone." Helen adjusted the bed slightly. "You need rest. Your body's still in fight mode. That adrenaline makes the fear quieter, but it doesn't go away." She didn't know how accurate she was. As soon as she left, I opened the drawer and looked at the lawyer's card again. The edges were crisp, no smudges. She had probably printed a fresh stack before walking into my room. She knew exactly what she was doing. I closed my eyes, taking slow breaths until the throbbing in my ribs settled. Then I pulled the bedside table closer and reached for the small plastic bag that held the personal belongings the ER salvaged. Most of it was ruined, my watch scratched to hell, my phone cracked, but my military ID and dog tags were intact. I held the tags in my hand, running my thumb across the raised letters. Overseas, they were my proof of life. Here, in this quiet hospital room, they grounded me. I turned on my broken phone. The screen flickered, lines streaking across it, but it worked long enough to see I had 16 missed calls from unknown numbers, from Sandra, from Evan, from a few neighbors. Not one from Travis. The last text I received from him, 2 days earlier, said, "Don't do anything stupid. Stay put. I'm handling it." Handling what? I tried calling my sister. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Caroline, are you okay?" Her tone was flat, like she wasn't sure which answer she wanted to hear. "I was in a crash." "I heard," she said. "Evan's friend saw something on the neighborhood Facebook group. We've been busy." That was the problem. Sandra was always busy telling me how to live my life, busy pretending her marriage was perfect, busy reminding me that military service wasn't a real career. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Did you talk to Travis recently?" She paused, long enough that I could hear the TV in her living room. "Why?" "Because he didn't come to the hospital, and now his lawyer showed up." "That's between you and him," she said quickly. "Don't drag us into it. If something's going on, I need to know." She exhaled, annoyed. "Look. He came by the house yesterday. He said you two were ending things and he needed to pick up some stuff. I assumed you knew." My grip on the phone tightened. "What stuff?" "Your spare keys. Some paperwork. A few boxes from the closet. Those boxes were mine." "Well," she said, "maybe not anymore." The line clicked. She hung up. The quiet in the room pressed in tight, but not in the empty way it had earlier. This time it felt crowded with too many questions, too many missing pieces, too many people acting like they expected me to vanish. I leaned back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling, letting everything settle into place. Someone wanted my inheritance. Someone wanted me out of the way. Someone had already taken steps to make sure of both. And Melissa walking in here like a vulture wearing my boyfriend's suit jacket wasn't the end of it. It was the opening shot. The next one came when the door opened again, not with caution, not with hesitation, but with the confidence of someone who believed they already owned the room. The woman who stepped into the room didn't bother closing the door behind her, like privacy was something only people who mattered deserved. She wore a crisp beige trench coat, expensive heels, and an expression that said she'd practiced being superior since childhood. Her blonde hair was twisted into a neat chignon, and she carried a leather tote that probably cost more than my Jeep. I'd recognize her anywhere. My sister's best friend, Julia Weston. She froze when she saw me sitting upright instead of unconscious. Her eyes darted to the heart monitor, the IV line, my bruised face checking the details the same way she scanned sales contracts for her real estate clients. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You look better than I expected," she said. I didn't answer. I was too busy replaying the last time I saw her 2 months ago at a barbecue, where she spent half an hour explaining why I was wasting my potential in the military, and why I should let Sandra guide me into a more stable lifestyle. Stable, of course, meaning obedient. Julia walked to the foot of the bed and placed a sealed envelope on the tray. Your sister asked me to drop this off. I stared at it, but didn't pick it up. Sandra couldn't come herself? She's overwhelmed, Julia said. This entire situation with Travis hit her hard. That comment landed like a blade between my ribs. Why would Travis dropping by my sister's house hit her hard? Julia smoothed her coat sleeve, pretending to fix a wrinkle that wasn't there. Because he told her you'd ended the relationship. He said you were struggling. There it was, the narrative they were stitching together like it was some arts and crafts project. And you believed him? I asked. I believe Sandra, Julia said. And she believes Travis wouldn't lie about something so important. I let out a humorless laugh. You've known me for 15 years. You've known him for 2. You've always been tough to read, Julia said lightly. Sandra worries about you, she always has. That line was so rehearsed, she might as well have printed it on a t-shirt. My ribs ached as I straightened a little. Open the envelope. Julia hesitated. It's for you. Open it anyway. Then, reluctantly, she slid her manicured finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Her eyes moved across it, and her face shifted slightly. Almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. A flicker of discomfort, maybe even guilt. She set the paper on the tray, smoothing it flat. It was a typed letter, short, pointlessly formal. My sister's signature at the bottom looked rushed, like she'd scribbled it the way you sign a receipt you don't want to pay. Caroline, given recent events and your unstable behavior, I believe it's best we take space. Once you are medically cleared, Evan and I think you should seek professional help. We can discuss next steps after you've had time to recover mentally. Sandra. I stared at it, letting the words sit there like a stain. Unstable behavior? I survived a crash. I woke up alone. Travis sent his lawyer instead of showing up himself. And my sister's big takeaway was that I needed space? Julia shifted from foot to foot now, clearly uncomfortable being the messenger. She's worried about the inheritance issue. She thinks it's putting pressure on you. I didn't blink. Did she mention the truck? What truck? The one that slammed into me. Julia's expression didn't change. Either she truly didn't know, or she was performing ignorance like a Broadway audition. All she said was that you were in a car accident. 9. You mean she didn't mention I was hit intentionally? Her gaze flickered, not surprise. Irritation, like I was making her job harder. Caroline, accidents happen. You shouldn't assume. I held her stare. Where was Sandra the day I was hit? At home, she said quickly. With Evan. And Travis? At their place. The answer came too fast, too clean, too rehearsed. I didn't push yet. I just let the silence stretch long enough that she began fidgeting with the strap of her bag. I'll tell Sandra you got the message, Julia said. She'll call you when she's ready. Do me a favor, I said. Tell her I'm ready now. She offered a polite smile, the kind rich people use when they're done pretending to care, and then walked out. The second the door clicked shut, I reached for the paper. My ribs screamed, but I needed to read it again, not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. Sandra wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't confused. She wasn't distant because she was processing trauma. She was aligning herself, choosing a side, calculating her interests. And she'd made her decision before I even woke up. My pulse thumped in my ears, steady and cold. I wasn't shocked she believed Travis. She always believed the people who made her life look better than mine did. But something was off, too coordinated, too quiet, too fast. Helen stepped in again, holding a cup of water. That woman didn't look like she came to help. No, she didn't, I said. Helen handed me the cup, studying my face. Your vitals are going up. You're thinking too hard. I'm seeing things clearly. She didn't argue. She sat at the edge of the chair and glanced at the paper. Family? That's what they call themselves. Helen crossed her arms. You ever think it's why you stayed in the service so long? Army might be rough, but at least when someone doesn't like you, they say it to your face. I took a breath, slow and controlled. She wasn't wrong. Before I could respond, someone down the hall started shouting a man's voice. Angry, trying to push past security. Helen stood immediately. You stay put, she ordered, already halfway to the door. But I was already listening the way soldiers do when danger is coming, but the room doesn't know it yet. The footsteps grew louder, heavy, violent, stomping like the person didn't care who heard him coming. Helen's voice echoed in the hallway, firm and sharp. "Sir, you cannot go in there without clearance." The man shouted something I couldn't make out. The security guard tried to block him, but his boots kept pounding closer. My fingers curled around the bed railing. Whoever it was, he knew where he was going. He wanted my room. My breath steadied, my vision sharpened, my instincts surged like a tide hitting shore. Then the doorknob rattled hard enough to jolt the frame. The guard barked an order. The man shoved again. And the door burst open. The man who stormed into the room moved with the confidence of someone used to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. He wore a charcoal suit tailored tight across broad shoulders, and his jaw was clenched so hard the muscles twitched. His eyes locked on me first sharp, assessing, irritated that I was conscious. Then they slid to the security guard trying to restrain him. "I said I'm her representative," he barked, shoving the guard's arm off like he was swatting a fly. I'd seen his face before. He'd been in the group photo at one of Travis's holiday work parties. This was Patrick Vaughn, a senior partner at some downtown law firm Travis constantly name-dropped. Not Fallon and Carter. A different one. More aggressive, more transactional. Patrick pointed at me like I was a folder he needed to sign and forget. "Sergeant Brooks, I need a moment. Alone." "No," I said instantly. The guard stepped again between us. Patrick glared at him. "You don't want to interfere with a legal matter." "I'm hospital security," the guard said. "I interfere with everything." Helen appeared behind Patrick, arms crossed like she wasn't afraid of him in the least. "You need to leave. Now." Patrick didn't move. "Caroline, you and I need to discuss the estate." My ribs tightened. "Funny. I don't remember appointing you as my counsel." "You didn't," he said, pulling a crisp folder from his inner pocket. "But your boyfriend did. Travis retained me to manage the transition of funds and prepare a set of motions on your behalf." I let out a slow breath. "On my behalf." "Yes." Before I even woke up, Patrick's jaw shifted. He was concerned about your immediate mental state after the accident. He wanted to make sure nothing complicated happened with the inheritance. "Oh, something complicated happened," I said. "Your client forgot to tell you I'm not dead." 1. Patrick's expression stayed frozen, but something in the way he swallowed told me he didn't like surprises. "I'm leaving these documents here," he said, stepping closer to the bed. The guard blocked him again. "They require your signature to proceed. You'll want to review them sooner rather than later." Helen took the folder from him before he could place it near me. "We'll handle it." Patrick adjusted his cufflinks like he needed grounding. "Travis will be here shortly." "Len." "No, he won't," I said. Patrick hesitated just long enough that I caught it. He knew something. Or he'd realized something wasn't lining up the way he'd been promised. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be," he said. I looked straight into his eyes, steady and unflinching. "Get out." He stared at me for 3 slow breaths before turning sharply on his heel and walking out, muttering something under his breath about uncooperative clients. "Nye." The guard followed him into the hallway. Helen closed the door behind them. "What's in the folder?" I asked. She didn't open it. She set it on the table like it was contaminated. "Something you shouldn't sign." "Let's see." Helen sighed and opened it carefully. The first page was a petition drafted, unsigned for me to grant temporary financial oversight to Travis, until emotional stabilization is confirmed post-trauma. The language was slick, precise, engineered to make me look like I couldn't balance a checkbook without supervision. Then came the kicker. A draft letter to Fallon and Carter, instructing them to begin transferring limited access authority to an interim executor, Travis Hale. My fingers tightened around the blanket. "They planned this fast," Helen muttered. "No," I said. "They planned this before the accident." It wasn't paranoia. It was math. These documents didn't appear overnight. Lawyers don't prepare guardianship drafts in 24 hours. Someone had been preparing for me to be incapacitated. Someone who wanted everyone to think they were helping. Helen sat down, watching my face. "You don't have to go through this alone. We can call hospital legal." I appreciated her offer. But hospital attorneys handled malpractice and insurance disputes. Not attempted murder. Not inheritance fraud. Not whatever Travis and my family thought they were engineering. My hands steadied against the rail. "I need someone who understands complex estate law. Someone who's not connected to my boyfriend or my sister." Helen nodded. "You have someone in mind?" Yes, I said. The lawyer who handled Gloria's estate. Attorney Fallon had been dry, humorless, and old enough to have weathered every kind of family disaster imaginable. That was exactly the kind of person I needed. I reached for my phone. The screen flickered again, but it powered on. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried the main office number. It rang to an automated message. Closed for the afternoon. Helen leaned on the footrail. Law firms usually have emergency contacts for estate cases. Check the envelope he gave you. I grabbed my bag from the bedside drawer and pulled out the thick packet Fallon had handed me. I flipped through the pages until I found a sticky note tucked inside. In the event of urgent matters, contact Attorney Morgan Ellis, Senior Litigator. Ellis Rourke, Tanner LLP. A number was scribbled beneath it. I dialed. A woman answered on the first ring. Ellis. I recognized her voice instantly. Crisp. Controlled. Dangerous in a courtroom sort of way. This is Sergeant Caroline Brooks, I said. There was a brief pause. You're Gloria Kane's beneficiary. Yes. What happened? Straight to business. Good. I was hit by a truck 2 days ago. Hospitalized. My boyfriend's lawyer showed up trying to get me to sign over control of my estate. Another pause, longer this time. I'll be there within the hour, she said. No hesitation. No questions. Just fact. Then she hung up. Helen's eyebrows lifted. That sounds promising. She's not coming because she likes me, I said. She's coming because she smells illegal wildfire. My ribs throbbed as I shifted upright again. My instinct wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was clarity, the same sharp focus I'd learned overseas when the situation stopped making sense and the only way out was forward. While Helen checked the machine at my bedside, a flicker of movement caught my eye through the small window in the door. Someone stood outside the room, tall, still uncomfortably familiar. For a second, I thought it was Patrick again. Then the figure shifted and I saw the profile. Sandra. My sister wasn't supposed to be here. She didn't walk in. She didn't knock. She just hovered outside the door, half hidden, listening. Her eyes weren't anxious. They weren't relieved. They were calculating, cold in a way I'd never seen on her face. When she realized I was staring at her, she stepped back like a shadow receding, disappearing from sight without a word or an explanation. My fingers tightened around the blanket again. Helen didn't notice she was adjusting my IV. But I watched the doorway, because Sandra hadn't come to see if I was alive. She came to see if I was still dying. Sandra's silhouette slipping away from the doorway pushed a strange, metallic calm through my chest. I eased my breathing until the ache in my ribs settled, and Helen finished checking the IV line like she hadn't just watched my sister lurk outside my room like someone timing a pull of the plug. Before she could ask anything, a knock came, steady, controlled, nothing like the banging from earlier. Helen opened the door a crack, then looked back at me with a slight nod. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, dark-tailored suit, hair pulled into a neat twist, and an expression that said she'd won more court battles than she'd lost nights of sleep. She carried a leather binder tucked under one arm, but no tote bag, no dramatics, no false warmth. Sergeant Brooks, she said, extending a hand. I'm Attorney Morgan Ellis. Now. Her handshake was firm, the kind that didn't try to dominate, just assured you she knew exactly what she was doing. Helen gave us space, but stayed close enough that she could step in if the room erupted again. Morgan set her binder on the rolling table and pulled a chair beside the bed. Before we start, tell me everything that's happened since you left Fallon's office. I didn't bother easing into it. I told her about the call, the truck, waking up alone, Melissa and Patrick showing up like they were delivering pizza orders, Sandra's cold letter, Julia's visit, and the fact that someone had been preparing documents to transfer control of my estate before my brain even rebooted. Morgan didn't interrupt. She listened the way trained officers listened in the field, quietly, intently, reading the terrain under the story. When I finished, she folded her hands. There's no scenario in which all of this is a coincidence. Someone knew about the inheritance before you did. Someone expected you to be incapacitated. Someone positioned counsel to swoop in and secure control. My jaw tightened. Travis. Maybe, she said. But a boyfriend doesn't get access to estate timelines unless someone hands it to him. Fallon told you about the review period? Yes. Then only a tiny circle at that firm even knew Miss Kane's estate was in motion. The fact that your boyfriend's attorney walked in here with pre-drafted control petitions? That tells me there's a leak or someone who wanted your assets redirected long before your name hit the file. I watched her flip open the binder. Inside was a neat stack of printouts, documents, emails, possibly communications from Fallon before his office closed for the day. Morgan continued. I pulled Miss Kane's probate filings and the sealed addendum naming you. Gloria was paranoid about money. Extremely paranoid. She instructed her attorneys to notify beneficiaries at the last possible moment. She did that to avoid what she called family vultures. That sounds like her, I said. She never trusted anyone. Morgan nodded. And she trusted you more than the rest of them. That's why this is dangerous. 11 million is enough to make people stupid. Enough to make them criminal. Enough to make them think removing one person fixes all their problems. Nido. My ribs throbbed, but the clarity in her voice steadied me. Morgan slid one document forward. This is a preliminary motion your boyfriend's attorney attempted to file electronically last night. It bounced because the system still requires your personal authorization. But he tried, and he tried before you were conscious. I stared at the timestamp, 2:14 a.m. Travis was busy while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. Morgan tapped the paper. He's not acting alone. People who plan this kind of grab prefer a chorus backing them. People like your sister, her husband, anyone who benefits from you being legally labeled unstable. And there it was the part of me that still wanted to believe family meant something twisted a little, but it didn't break. Not this time. I need this stopped, I said. That's why I'm here. Morgan pulled another form from her binder. We're filing a restraining order against Travis, his attorneys, and anyone attempting to act as financial proxy on your behalf. Helen let out a small, satisfied grunt from across the room. Good. We'll also file an emergency injunction preventing any financial movement without your direct, in-person signature. Morgan paused. But that alone won't deter people willing to engineer a car crash. That truth settled heavy in the air. Morgan leaned back slightly. Do you feel unsafe outside this hospital? I didn't even have to think. Yes. Do you have access to secure housing? Not right now. Morgan nodded. I can arrange for protective transport and a temporary private location until we secure your estate. But I need your consent to act as your counsel. You've got it. Morgan closed the binder with a quiet click. Then first, we stabilize your position legally. Next, we isolate whoever is orchestrating this. And last, we tear apart their strategy until they're the ones answering questions. Helen crossed her arms. Sounds like someone's going to have a long week. Morgan didn't smile. They should have a long sentence. She reached for her bag, sleek, structured, not the oversized designer kind. Melissa flaunted and pulled out a slim recorder. I need a formal statement. It won't leave my possession. 0. I gave her everything again, this time with dates, times, names, and the details I hadn't realized mattered until now. The panic in Travis's voice when I first called him, the timeline of Sandra's letter. The way Julia avoided eye contact, the exact phrasing Patrick used when he said I was making things difficult. Morgan saved the file, tucked the recorder away, and stood. I'm going to meet with hospital security to ensure access restrictions hold. After that, I'll confirm whether Travis attempted to request your medical records. People trying to prove incompetence always fish there first. It was almost funny if you ignored the cracked ribs and attempted vehicular homicide. Helen walked her to the door. If she needs anything, call me directly, Morgan said, day or night. When the door closed, Helen turned back to me with that mix of sympathy and respect she'd started wearing around me. Well, at least you've got a shark on your side. I rested back against the pillow, the room finally quiet again. But quiet didn't mean empty. Quiet meant the pieces were arranging themselves, names, motives, timelines sliding into place with a precision that felt painfully familiar. Not a battlefield, a strategy map. Someone out there wasn't finished. Someone thought they were smarter, faster, entitled to my money, and maybe my life. Someone who assumed I wouldn't get back up. But I'd built a career on getting back up. The steady hum of the hospital air system blended into the background as I shifted upright, careful not to pull the IV needle. My ribs still felt like someone had wrapped them in barbed wire, but clarity kept cutting through the pain. The kind of clarity that shows up when the facts are ugly enough that denial stops being an option. Helen brought in a new round of meds and checked the machines with the precision of someone who'd seen enough nonsense from visitors today. You holding up? I'm awake, I said. That's already inconvenient for a few people. She huffed a short laugh. Good. Keep being inconvenient. Before I could answer, someone knocked, but not timidly, 3 quick taps, precise, almost coded. Morgan stepped inside with the same steady stride she'd walked in with earlier, binder now thicker, like she'd already collected half of Manhattan's legal filings in 2 hours. We have movement, she said, taking the same chair beside the bed. I didn't ask her what kind, I just waited. First, she said, opening the binder, I contacted Fallon's office through a backline. Gloria's former paralegal confirmed something extremely important. The identity of the beneficiary was sealed, but the list of potential relatives who weren't receiving money wasn't. And someone requested that list last week. My jaw tightened. Requested by who? Your sister's husband, Evan. That landed exactly the way Morgan expected it to, like proof of a suspicion I didn't want validated but had already accepted. She continued. He claimed he was collecting genealogical information for a family project. A lie so sloppy it barely qualifies as a lie. No. I wasn't surprised. Evan was the type who bragged about being strategic, which usually meant manipulating people badly and assuming no one noticed. Morgan flipped to another page. Second development. I checked electronic filings in the court system. There was an attempted submission by Patrick, your boyfriend's lawyer, trying to initiate a petition for emergency conservatorship. I let out a slow breath. He didn't have access to medical evaluations. He couldn't do that legally. No, Morgan said, but he tried to attach a letter claiming you had a documented history of mental instability. My grip tightened around the blanket. I've never had anything diagnosed. I know, Morgan said, but the letter was typed on what looks like a clinic letterhead, a Real Mind Wellness Center in Midtown, except that clinic doesn't exist. Whoever drafted it was counting on no one checking. Who gave them the idea to use mental instability? I asked. Morgan paused just enough to make the answer obvious. Your mother. A dull, familiar pressure grew behind my ribs. Not emotional, more like remembering a bruise you thought had healed but still aches when poked. Morgan continued, calm and clinical. I found a voicemail she left on a clerk's office line. She asked how to report concerns about a relative's mental state before the inheritance process. She didn't use your name, but she didn't have to. The timing matches. Not. Helen muttered under her breath. These people are unbelievable. I didn't argue. They weren't unbelievable. They were predictable. The moment money entered the conversation, all the old family dynamics sharpened, like someone turned up the contrast. Morgan slid another sheet toward me. This part is more serious. The truck that hit you registered to Stratford Hauling, which is owned by a shell company. That shell company is managed by a logistics firm. And that firm? She tapped the page twice. Your sister's husband sits on their advisory board. For a moment, every noise in the hospital room faded out. The beeping, the hallway chatter, even the pain in my ribs. All that remained was the line connecting everything. Evan's access to the non-beneficiary list, Patricia's fake mental health concerns, Travis's sudden push for oversight, the collision timed within hours of the estate announcement. You're telling me they coordinated it, I said. I'm telling you, Morgan said. Someone coordinated it, and it wasn't a solo act. My fingers rested against the bed rail steady. What's next? Morgan leaned back, assessing me like she was confirming something about my posture, my expression, my tone. Now we build a case strong enough that when authorities look at it, they don't see a family dispute, they see conspiracy, fraud, and attempted homicide. Helen raised her brows. Does NYPD take cases like that seriously? Morgan's tone sharpened, but not unkindly. They take airtight cases seriously. She pulled out a narrow envelope. I've already filed a protective order that prevents any party from accessing your medical records without your explicit consent. The hospital has copies on file. Helen nodded approvingly. And, Morgan continued, I issued cease and desist letters to Travis, Patrick, and your sister's household. They'll receive them within hours. None of that surprised me, but something still didn't line up. They set this up fast, I said. No, Morgan corrected gently. They set this up early. The moment someone learned you were the beneficiary, they began preparing for the outcome they wanted. How early could they have known? I asked. Morgan closed the binder, her expression controlled but tight. The moment Fallon's paralegal created the sealed notice, the internal system logged the new estate assignment. Only staff with clearance could see the metadata, if anyone inside the firm leaked that information. Fallon's office has a mole, I said. Possibly. Or someone who overheard something, Morgan replied. But your boyfriend's lawyer showing up this fast isn't normal. Someone tipped him off. And not by accident. Helen crossed her arms. So what do we do now? Morgan answered without hesitation. Now I send an investigator to pull the full accident report. And we secure whatever footage exists. Traffic lights, building cameras, dash cams, anything that shows that truck moving before it hit her. And anything that shows whether someone followed her. Helen frowned. You think she was followed? Morgan gave me a look sharp enough to cut. I think the timing of the crash is too precise. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. It was military instinct. It was the way every detail clicked together in a line that pointed to the same conclusion. As Morgan gathered her things, another knock came, this one lighter, slower, the kind that belonged to someone unsure whether they should even be approaching the door. Helen opened it. A hospital transport nurse stood there holding a sealed evidence bag. This was dropped off for Sergeant Brooks, she said. It was found near the scene of her crash. PD forwarded it over. Nah. She handed Helen the bag and left. Helen turned it in her hands, brow furrowing. It looks like a phone? A cracked smartphone sat inside black case, cheap model, screen shattered. But I recognized it instantly. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Travis's. It wasn't Sandra's. It belonged to Evan, my sister's husband. I'd seen that ugly, cheap case at every holiday dinner since 2018. Helen handed the bag to me carefully, like it might burn through the plastic. The weight of it settled in my hand light, but heavy in the way evidence is heavy. While I studied the broken screen, Morgan watched my expression with a level of focus that made it clear she was already turning this into a timeline, a legal attack plan, a strategy. The phone wasn't random. It wasn't lost. It wasn't misplaced. It was a mistake. And mistakes meant cracks. Cracks meant leverage. Leverage meant someone in my family had just given me the piece I didn't even know I needed. The cracked phone in my hand felt like a piece of metal pulled straight from the wreckage. The kind of object that carried weight without being heavy. Helen watched me rotate it under the fluorescent lights, careful not to tug the IV line, while Morgan sat back down, already treating it like the next puzzle piece. That's Evan's phone, I said, calm enough that Helen paused mid-step. He never upgrades. Says new models encourage overspending. Morgan reached out, and I handed it over. She held it by the edges through the plastic, examining the shattered screen and the dents in the casing. This was either dropped during impact or someone threw it away in a hurry. There's no reason for him to be anywhere near Lexington, I said. He works in Midtown East, lives in Queens, never uses that area unless Sandra drags him to a Broadway show. Helen tilted her head. So why was his phone at your crash site? Because he was there, I said, or close enough to lose it. Not. Morgan didn't comment. She didn't need to. She slipped the evidence bag into her binder with the same care a soldier loads a round into a chamber. I'll hand this to the investigator I'm working with, she said. They'll extract whatever data is left. Can they get anything off a phone this damaged? Helen asked. If the motherboard isn't cooked, yes, Morgan replied. Even if it is, there are ways. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Her confidence wasn't salesmanship, it was experience. The room settled into a quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was focused, heavy with reality, but steady in a way that made breathing easier. Morgan pressed her palms against her knees. Now that we have a direct physical link, I'm expanding the scope. I'll file for preserved surveillance footage within a 5-mile radius of the crash. That includes storefronts, apartment lobbies, parking garages, traffic signals. I nodded. They'll try to erase something. They can try, Morgan said. But removal attempts leave traces too. Helen crossed her arms, leaning against the cabinet. Do you think Evan would sabotage footage? Morgan gave a dry exhale. People who stand to lose millions tend to get creative. And people who think they're smarter than everyone else tend to make sloppy choices. I didn't have to imagine it. I could picture Evan at his desk, tapping his pen, thinking he was orchestrating a master plan because he watched a cybercrime documentary once. Morgan continued, The next step is your sister. What about her? Helen asked. Morgan looked at me. I need to know if you want her notified about the protective order. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be certain my decision wasn't coming from anger born in the hospital bed. I waited until every piece of logic lined up. Yes, I said. If she's part of this, she should know she's being watched. If she's not, she'll tell us by how fast she panics. Morgan nodded once. I'll serve her household. Quietly and legally. Helen gave a low whistle. You don't play around. I don't like sloppy crimes, Morgan said. She pulled another document from her binder. Now preparing for the next step. I arranged for a private room upgrade under donor sponsorship. Hospital will move you this afternoon. Fewer interruptions, restricted access, 2-factor ID checks. Helen nodded approvingly. That'll keep the parade of lunatics to a minimum. Before I could reply, someone tapped softly on the doorframe. A young man in plain clothes stepped inside, hospital volunteer badge clipped to his collar. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Security asked me to deliver something to Sergeant Brooks. Morgan shifted instantly, alert but composed. I reached for the envelope he held out. It wasn't hospital stationery, it wasn't legal stationery. It was a plain white envelope with my name printed in bold black ink, like someone typed it on a cheap home printer. Helen stepped closer. Where did you get this? The volunteer pointed toward the elevators. Guy left it at the main desk, said it was urgent. What guy? Morgan asked. He shrugged. Didn't give a name. The envelope weighed almost nothing. I opened it carefully, expecting another forged letter or guilt-laced lecture. Instead, one single sheet of paper slid out, printed in the same cheap typeface. We need to talk before things go too far. Tonight, 8 p.m. Parking garage level 2, stairwell C. Come alone. Helen grabbed it from my hand before I fully processed it. You're not going anywhere alone. Morgan examined the paper. This isn't your sister's style. She prefers guilt trips over anonymity. It could be Travis, I said. Too short, Morgan replied. He uses paragraphs when lying. Evan? Possible, she said. But the phrasing doesn't match his usual tone. Too direct. Patrick? Morgan shook her head. Patrick would have served you a subpoena. Helen frowned. So who sent it? Morgan slid the paper into her binder. Someone who wants to get ahead of the investigation. Someone who knows things are tightening. I rubbed my temples gently, careful not to disturb the bruises. If they want to talk, let them, but we're not doing it in a parking garage. Morgan smirked slightly. Good. You think like a litigant already. She stood. I'll have someone watch stairwell C at 8. If anyone shows, they'll be photographed. If they try anything stupid, they'll be detained. Will they come? Helen asked. If they're desperate, Morgan said. And based on how fast these people have moved, desperation is already setting in. Helen glanced at my monitors again. I'll have the room prepped for transfer. You'll be upstairs in an hour. Morgan gathered her binder. I have meetings with 2 investigators and a forensic accountant. I'll return when I have updates. Thank you, I said. She studied my face, something in her eyes both sharp and steady. This isn't personal weakness. This is targeted manipulation and greed. Don't let them convince you you're overreacting. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She saw it in my posture. When Morgan left, the room felt heavier but more anchored. Helen adjusted my blanket and shook her head. Family shouldn't be allowed near money. I gave a quiet half-laugh. Or near me. She rolled her eyes. No kidding. As she stepped out to coordinate the transfer, I looked at the blank TV screen. Not to watch anything, just because the dark reflection helped me think. Evan requesting that non-beneficiary list. The forged clinic letter. The timing of the crash. Travis pushing for control before I could even open my eyes. Sandra lurking outside my room like someone checking a pulse they hoped was gone. And now someone leaving a handwritten summons in an envelope. They weren't just panicking. They were splitting apart. Desperation does that. It makes conspirators sloppy. Makes mismatched stories crack at the seams. Morgan was right. People don't come clean. But they do come undone. The orderly who showed up to move me looked too young to be trusted with driving a golf cart, but he handled the bed with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The hospital's private wing was quieter, colder, and felt like it had been designed specifically for people who didn't want to be found. It worked for me. Helen settled me into the new room, no roommate, reinforced door lock, and a hallway that required badge access. She double-checked everything with the stubbornness of a mother and the efficiency of a drill sergeant. No unexpected visitors, she said. Anyone who walks in here, they're either cleared by me or they're lost. I almost smiled. Sounds good. When she left, the room finally went still. The stillness wasn't threatening, it was strategic. A holding pattern. The kind of quiet I'd learned to use overseas when the world tilted and the only sane thing to do was measure the direction of the wind. My ribs ached, but it was rhythmic now, familiar. Something I could work around. About half an hour later, the door opened slightly. Not abruptly, not tentatively, just enough that whoever stood there was asking without asking. When I looked up, it wasn't Helen, or Morgan, or a stranger. It was Sandra. My sister's expression was smoother than earlier, like she'd had time to rehearse her face. Her hair was perfect, makeup neat, coat pressed. She always dressed like she believed every outing was a performance. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her with slow deliberation. For the first time since the crash, she didn't have anyone else with her. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice calm, flat. "I came because you weren't answering," she said. "I wasn't answering because you sent me a letter saying I needed psychiatric help." "No, Will. That wasn't what I meant," she replied, eyes scanning the room, landing anywhere except on me. "You misunderstood." "I read the letter," I said. "I understood every word." Her jaw tightened a little. She pulled the nearest chair closer, sitting with careful posture, like she was afraid the seat might catch her in a lie. "You look worse than the photos made it seem," she said. "The bruising." "You had photos?" She blinked. "Someone posted pictures from the crash site online. Neighborhood groups." "Right," I said. "Neighborhood groups." It wasn't a big detail, but it landed wrong. Like she knew more about those photos than she wanted to admit. Sandra smoothed her blouse like she was ironing her nerves back into place. "I know things have been tense. I know you're angry. I know the inheritance has been overwhelming. Not for me." Her eyes finally met mine for the first time since she walked in. They were glossy, not with emotion, but calculation. "You have to understand something," she said, voice softening in a way that always meant she was preparing to manipulate. "Mom is worried. Evan is stressed. Everyone's trying to make sense of this. You've been through trauma before, but this is different. Money complicates people. It complicates families." "No," I said. "People complicate money." Her fingers twitched. "That's not fair." "Fair is not the issue." Sandra shifted, shoulders curling in slightly. She hated direct conflict unless she was backed by Evan or Mom. Alone, she wilted faster. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "If you would just let someone help manage things." "Someone like Travis?" She froze for half a second before tilting her head. "He's trying. He told us he's been calling." "No," I said. "He hasn't. You probably ignored." "He hasn't called," I repeated sharper. "Would you like me to show you the call log?" Her throat bobbed. "Caroline, I don't want to fight. You came here to control the narrative. You always do." She inhaled sharply, her patience thinning. "That's not true. You told Julia I was unstable." Sandra's lips parted, then pressed shut again. Her eyes darted downward. "You don't know what she told you," she said quietly. "I know what you wrote in the letter. That letter wasn't meant to be cruel. We didn't know what state you'd be in." "We?" I asked. She flinched barely, but enough. A tiny crack forming. I kept my tone steady. "Sandra, why was Evan's phone at the crash site?" Her face drained. Her posture stiffened so fast it looked like muscle memory. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Hospital security gave it to me, found near my wreck." She swallowed so slowly it could have been scripted. "I have no idea how that happened," she said, voice shaky for the first time. "He never mentioned." "That's the problem," I said. "He didn't mention a lot of things." She pushed her palms against her knees like she needed leverage to hold up her excuses. "Caroline, you're injured. You're confused. You're misinterpreting things because you're scared." "I'm not scared," I said. "I'm paying attention." Sandra's eyes flicked toward the door, like she was considering how quickly she could leave. Her veneer was chipping, and she knew it. "You can't point fingers at family," she whispered. "Not without proof." Affably. "I have proof," I said. "More than you think." The shift in her expression wasn't subtle, it was fear disguised as offense. Her breathing changed, shallow and tight. She clasped her hands together, knuckles white. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. "I'm doing nothing," I said. "Your choices already set this in motion." Sandra blinked rapidly. She wasn't used to losing control of a conversation. She'd spent years believing she was the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the voice of logic, the stable sibling. Now she looked like someone watching a tower tilt. "I need you to listen," she said, leaning forward. "Whatever ideas you've gotten from lawyers or nurses or whoever, this isn't a plot. No one wants to hurt you." "Interesting," I said. "Then who arranged the conservatorship petition?" Her mouth opened, but no sound arrived. "Who coordinated attorney visits before I woke up?" "Nothing." "Who lied to me about Travis calling?" Her gaze fell to the floor. "Who told Patrick to prepare documents claiming I'm mentally unfit?" Silence. "And who requested the non-beneficiary list from Fallon's office?" Sandra's shoulders trembled faintly, the smallest quake, but it was there. She took a long breath in, then exhaled slowly, like she was making a decision she didn't want recorded. "You always think everything is so clear-cut," she said, voice almost cracking. "Like people don't have reasons." "Reasons for what?" She stared at the edge of the bed, not at me. "Reasons," she said, "for wanting what they deserve." The words didn't shock me. The tone did. A whisper, a confession, a fracture. "What do you think you deserve?" I asked. Her lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Not directly. Not verbally. But her silence said enough. When she finally stood, her face had gone cold again. Composed, controlled, but her eyes, they weren't. She walked to the door without another word. And the moment it clicked shut, the air in the room shifted, heavy, electric, a static charge settling over everything. I'd seen that look before. Not in her. In soldiers who realized the plan they backed was falling apart, and now they were deciding what to salvage before the ground gave out beneath them. The room stayed strangely warm after Sandra left, like her guilt had raised the temperature a few degrees. I shifted against the pillow until the pressure eased off my ribs, and for the first time since the crash, I felt my mind settle into a straight line instead of spiraling. If Sandra had shown that crack in her voice 2 days earlier, I might have mistaken it for emotion. Now it read like pressure from someone whose plan wasn't going the way it was drawn. Morgan returned an hour later carrying a slim laptop under her arm and a manila folder sealed with red evidence tape. "Good timing," she said as she settled into the chair. "PD sent their preliminary findings." Helen lingered near the foot of the bed as Morgan opened the folder. She didn't have the lawyer's calm poker face. Helen's expression tightened immediately. Morgan adjusted her glasses. "The traffic cam footage confirms that the truck changed lanes deliberately. No braking, no obstruction, no mechanical malfunction." I nodded once, steady. I'd already known, but hearing it said out loud by someone with credentials sharpened the edges. "And the driver?" I asked. "Still missing," Morgan said. "But the truck was abandoned half a mile from the collision, cleaned out, wiped." "Professionally?" I asked. "No," she said. "Sloppy. Wires torn, not cut. Prints smudged, not removed. Someone tried to hide evidence but didn't know how." "That fits Evan," I said. "That fits a desperate group," Morgan corrected. "Not a mastermind." She clicked open her laptop and rotated the screen. "There's more." PD also shared this still frame. The frame showed a dark sedan in the lane back from the crash site, far enough not to be involved, close enough to observe. A single figure sat in the driver's seat, face blurred by motion. I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pull in my ribs. "That car looks familiar." "That's because it is," Morgan said. "It's registered to your mother." Helen let out a low breath. "Wow." I didn't react immediately. Not because I was shocked, because the confirmation knitted cleanly into the pattern already forming. "She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Lexington," I said. "Yet there she was," Morgan replied. "Watching. Not helping. Leaving." The air in the room felt colder now, but the cold wasn't emotional. It was clarifying. Morgan closed the laptop and rested her hands atop it. "I've seen families implode before. I've seen inheritance disputes get ugly. But this has layers. Intent, movement, coordination. And incompetence," I said. "And incompetence," she agreed lightly. "The mix that lands people in federal court." Helen shook her head. "Your mother, your sister, their husbands, your boyfriend, all involved?" "Someone else is pulling strings," Morgan said, "or at least connecting lines they can't legally touch." "No." The logical part of my brain reached for the next task. "So what do you need from me?" Morgan gave a small, approving nod. "Strength, clarity, and your presence tonight." Helen frowned. "Tonight?" Morgan opened another file. "I had PD and the state attorney review the evidence so far. They agree we have enough for preliminary arrests. They want to coordinate with you for service timing. Why me? I asked. Because, Morgan said, crossing her legs, they think catching everyone together increases success. Fewer variables, fewer escape routes. Where? I asked. Morgan looked directly at me. Your mother's Sunday dinner, Helen blurted out. Absolutely not. It's strategic, Morgan said. They're all planning to be there. Sandra told her mother earlier today that she intended to talk sense into you. Evan will follow. Patricia will expect compliance. And Travis? She paused. He's been calling your mother's number, repeatedly. A faint, bitter taste rose in my mouth. So they're regrouping. They're cornered, Morgan corrected. Tonight is when they expect to regain control. We simply let them gather and let law enforcement handle the rest. Helen pressed her hands to her hips. You want to take a woman with fractured ribs into a dining room full of people who might have arranged to kill her 2 days ago? Morgan didn't blink. Yes. Because she will not be unprotected. The room will be monitored. Officers will be outside. And she will not be alone. I exhaled through my nose, slow and steady. I go. But not because they want it. Because it ends tonight. Both women looked at me, but neither argued. The decision settled itself. Morgan laid out the logistics with clinical precision. You'll be transported by secure vehicle. 2 plainclothes officers will accompany. You will walk in as normally as someone with cracked ribs can manage. They'll be expecting shock or weakness. You provide neither. That shouldn't be hard, I said. Helen looked between us like we were rearranging the world too casually. You better hydrate if you're going to be performing tonight. Morgan smirked faintly. Consider it a reunion, just with handcuffs. Night. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, steady rhythm: medical checks, paperwork, briefings, the dull ache of bruised cartilage reminding me I was human, not invincible. By the time the transport van arrived, the sun had dipped low, casting the city in that mix of orange and blue that always made it look cleaner than it was. The officers who accompanied me wore civilian clothes and moved like men who had trained for pressure. I appreciated that. I didn't need babysitting. I needed competence. My mother's house sat on a quiet street in Queens brick, 2-story, trimmed hedges, a perfect facade of normalcy. The front window glowed with warm yellow light, shadow outlines moving behind curtains. The officers positioned themselves outside without ceremony. One of them opened the van door. You ready, Sarge? He asked. I've been ready. The walk to the door was short but felt precise, every step deliberate. My ribs protested, but the pain sharpened my focus rather than dulling it. I knocked once. The noise inside stopped abruptly, voices cutting off, chairs shifting, something glass clinking. Then footsteps. The door opened. My sister stood there, hair curled, blouse immaculate, expression composed. But her eyes widened just enough to betray something raw and unfiltered. Shock, or regret, or fear too late to be useful. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I stepped past her into the dining room, where my mother, Evan, and Travis all turned at the same time, faces freezing like a photograph taken 1 second too soon. No one reached for me. No one rushed forward. No one said my name. They simply stared. And in that stillness, something inside each of them shifted, but not the way they intended. Sandra's perfume was the first thing I noticed when I stepped deeper into the dining room, the same floral cloud she used in high school whenever she wanted to look innocent while doing something awful. She lingered behind me in the doorway like she hoped proximity alone would shield her from consequences. It didn't. Patricia stood at the head of the table in one of her church dresses, a fork suspended in midair like she'd been caught mid-sermon. Evan sat stiffly, hands under the table, jaw working like he was chewing fear instead of food. And Travis stared straight at me, face pale, shoulders tight, every sign of a man calculating exit routes he didn't have. No one said my name. No one moved a chair. No one pretended this was a family dinner anymore. I kept walking until I reached the end of the table and rested one hand lightly on the back of a chair. My ribs complained, but I held still and let the silence thicken around us until it felt like the room was shrink-wrapping them in their own discomfort. Patricia recovered first, because of course she did. She set the fork down slowly, like she was placing evidence on a table for dramatic effect. Well, she said, voice tight and cold, look who's finally decided to show her face, after embarrassing us all week. I ignored her completely. Attention was the one currency she didn't deserve. Travis stood up next, pushing away from the table with more noise than needed. "You shouldn't be here," he said, deep voice cracking just a little at the edges. "You should have stayed at the hospital. You're not well." Helen stepped into the room behind me, quiet and unbothered, but present enough to shift the air. Morgan slipped beside her and opened her briefcase like she was about to grade their sins line by line. I let Travis take a single breath before responding. "I'm well enough to walk, well enough to talk, well enough to identify the car my mother drove to a crash site." Patricia's fingers curled into her napkin. "I don't know what you're implying." "You do," I said. Evan's leg bounced under the table, the kind of nervous tic that always gave him away during strategy meetings. He reached for a glass of water but didn't drink from it. "You're confused," he said. "The pain meds. Spare it." I know the difference between confusion and attempted murder. Sandra flinched visibly at the word murder, and for a second, her eyes darted toward the front window as if the idea of witnesses scared her more than the crime. Morgan rested a hand on the back of another chair. "PD has traffic footage, phone records, financial transactions, enough to file multiple felony charges." The color drained from Evan's face so fast he looked like he'd been unplugged. Travis tried a different tactic: anger. He slammed a hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "You're lying," he snapped. "You're making things up to ruin us." Helen tilted her head. "You hired a guy who couldn't even wipe fingerprints properly. If you're going to attempt a cover-up, at least hire someone with a GED. Patricia jabbed a finger toward Helen. "Who are you to speak in my house? The person who kept your daughter alive?" Helen shot back. "You're welcome." "No." A chair scraped behind us as one of the plainclothes officers stepped in. No words, just presence calm, steady, unmovable. The officers in the yard were waiting for the signal, but the tension in the room didn't need any help reaching a breaking point. Morgan opened a manila folder and placed it directly in front of Patricia. "These are the formal charges recommended by the state attorney," she said. "They include conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, and aiding an attempted homicide." 9. Patricia snatched the papers like she planned to tear them up, but her eyes flicked across the first page, then the second. Her lips twitched. Her chest rose and fell in short, sharp breaths. "You can't do this," she said. "This is family." "Exactly," I replied. "Which is why it hurts less to let strangers handle it." Travis took a step closer to me, maybe to intimidate me, maybe to talk me down. Either way, he miscalculated. The second officer entered the room and positioned himself between us without a word, one hand resting near his belt. Travis went still. Morgan continued flipping through pages with a cold efficiency that made the whole moment feel like an annual performance review rather than the collapse of a criminal conspiracy. "Evan Miller," she said, glancing up. "Financial transfers tying you to the payment for the vehicle. The account you use traces back to Sandra's management office. Very sloppy." "No." Evan swallowed hard. "It was a mistake." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "The attempted killing or the paperwork?" Sandra's breathing sped up so fast it was audible. "I didn't know he was going to hurt her," she blurted out, voice cracking. "I thought it was something else. I never signed anything. I didn't wire anything. I just—" Evan turned on her instantly. "Don't say a word." But Sandra had snapped. "She told me to," she cried, pointing at Patricia. "She told me to keep her busy, keep her distracted, keep her away from the firm. She was the one who said she'd handle the rest. I thought she meant professionally, not this." I didn't look at Patricia. I kept my eyes on Sandra. "You were never the target," I said. "Just the bait." Sandra sagged back against the wall like her knees had vanished. Morgan tapped a final page. "Patricia Washington, Travis Cole, Evan Miller, you're all named directly or indirectly in the conspiracy. You will be taken into custody for questioning." Patricia rose abruptly, knocking her chair over. "How dare you bring the police into my home?" "You brought criminals into mine," I said. Travis made one more attempt to push through the officer, but this time the officer stepped forward, grabbed his wrist, and twisted him around in one clean motion. The cuffs clicked sharp, final. Evan didn't resist. He just stared at the table like it could offer instructions. Patricia backed away as the other officer approached, her voice cracking between indignation and panic. "You're doing this to get revenge. This is revenge against your own mother." "No," I said. "This is protection. Revenge would have been easier." Sandra slid down the wall to the floor, hands over her face, shaking but silent. The officers guided them toward the entryway one by one, Not rushed, just deliberate, like this was a routine checkmark on a list. Morgan closed her briefcase. Helen placed a hand on my shoulder, not dramatic, just grounding. As the dining room emptied of noise and movement, the warm light felt different, not comforting, not nostalgic. Just light, hitting a room full of plates no one would finish. I stayed standing for a moment longer, long enough to let the air settle, long enough to make sure my legs held steady. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt present completely, unmistakably present in a way that didn't need an ending or a new beginning.